Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we bring you some of the biggest stories of the week. I'm Song Yoo-jin, coming to you from Arirang's virtual studio. For the first time in 17 years, South Korea is set to reform its national pension system amid growing concerns over the fund's depletion and the country's rapidly aging population. We'll take a look at the proposed changes. After nearly a month, North Korea has resumed sending trash-filled balloons across the inter-Korean border. This came as South Korea and the United States discussed how to respond jointly to potential provocations from the North in the coming months. Wednesday, September 4th, marked International Taekwondo Day, celebrating Korea's traditional martial arts. What does this day signify, and how was it celebrated this year? We begin this week on the diplomatic front. South Korea and New Zealand held a bilateral summit in Seoul on Wednesday, agreeing to elevate their bilateral ties to a new level. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon has a wrap-up of the meeting.
South Korea and New Zealand on Wednesday agreed to advance discussions to upgrade their bilateral relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership from the current Partnership for the 21st Century established in 2006. The goal is to adapt the relevant framework by 2025. This came from a joint statement following a summit between President Yoon Suk-yeol and New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon held at the Yongsan Presidential Office. Prime Minister Luxon arrived around 11:20 a.m. and proceeded to the summit after a short welcoming ceremony where they greeted each other and highlighted the depth of the bilateral ties.
뉴질랜드는 6.25 전쟁에서 우리와 함께 싸운 오랜 우방국으로서 뉴질랜드 참전 용사들의 숭고한 희생은 대한민국 발전의 초석이 됐습니다.
It's a country best known to New Zealanders for the energy and the creativity of your K-pop and your TV shows. It's the birthplace of a very famous Korean Kiwi, Lydia Ko, an Olympic champion golfer, someone who's just recently won the British Open, and I think she embodies the very best of both New Zealand and Korea.
In the meantime, the joint statement specified ways to expand bilateral ties in trade, regional security, and civilian exchanges. Especially regarding North Korea, President Yoon Suk-yeol emphasized the need to stand together as like-minded nations.
러브 군사 협력, 우크라이나 전쟁 등 전체주의, 권위주의 세력의 도전이 지속되는 엄중한 상황에서 한국과 뉴질랜드를 포함한 가치 공유국들 간의 연대는 그 어느 때보다 중요합니다.
In fact, through the statement, both sides condemned, quote, in the strongest possible terms, the increasing military cooperation between the DPRK and Russia. New Zealand also showed its support for President Yoon's August 15 unification doctrine, which was unveiled by the president on Liberation Day, becoming the first nation to openly support the doctrine, which mainly talks about unification on the basis of liberal democracy. In terms of trade and economic cooperation, the two nations noted that it's been a successful decade since the Korea-New Zealand FTA came into effect, which has doubled the trade volume between the two countries. In addition, both sides decided to launch a regular bilateral economic security dialogue to discuss economic security challenges and opportunities. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, in domestic news, pensions have been a key part of South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's reform agenda for the remainder of his term. On Wednesday, the government announced what changes it plans to make to the National Pension Service. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young breaks down the proposal.
The government's pension reform proposal focuses on fairness and sustainability. The Health Ministry on Wednesday announced a plan that includes gradually increasing the pension contribution rate from the current 9% to 13%. However, the pace of increase will vary by age group to ease the long-term burden for the younger generation.
For those in their 50s, who will receive more benefits compared to their contributions, the rate will rise by 1 percentage point annually over 4 years. For those in their 20s, who will contribute the most over a longer period, it will rise by 0.25 percentage points annually over 16 years.
The government also plans to maintain the current gross pension replacement rate, which is 42%, that being the percentage of pre-retirement wages people will receive at the end.
It was originally set to reach 40% by 2028. However, considering public feedback on the need for both financial stability and better retirement income, it will be raised to 42%.
Details of the proposal came after President Yoon Suk-yeol pledged to reform the pension system as the country's rapidly aging society faces the possible depletion of pension funds by 2056. Under the plan, the National Pension Fund's deficit would be delayed by 13 years and its depletion by 16 years. The government is also looking at adding a so-called automatic adjustment system, which adjusts pension payout amounts based on factors including population changes and economic conditions. The government plans to extend the birth credit benefit too, which was previously available only from the birth of a second child, to include the first child and apply it immediately upon childbirth. The plan also includes expanding military service credit to recognize the entire duration of mandatory military service rather than the current 6 months. Marking the first government pension reform in 17 years, the proposal is subject to approval by the National Assembly. 신하영, Arirang News.
And another major announcement from the Ministry of Health and Welfare this week addressed the months-long walkout and resignation of resident doctors affecting emergency units. Our Choi Min-jung explains the steps being taken to prevent disruptions to medical services for those in urgent need.
Around 6 months since the mass resignation of resident doctors, public concern is mounting over the country's emergency care system. With the lack of personnel in emergency units, the government has decided to deploy military doctors to fill the gaps.
We will deploy replacement personnel, including military doctors and public health doctors, as soon as possible.
On Wednesday, a total of 15 military doctors will be deployed to medical institutions with limited emergency care. Starting next Monday, approximately 235 military and public health doctors will be dispatched to high-risk institutions. The government also laid out measures to prevent a potential medical crisis during the upcoming Chuseok holiday in the third week of September. This comes as the medical community warns that more university hospitals will close emergency rooms during the holiday, while the number of patients is bound to increase.
We'll operate emergency response weeks for approximately 2 weeks, from September 11th to 25th, and make every effort to minimize disruption in treating severe emergency patients.
The lack of personnel has caused university hospitals to suspend the running of emergency rooms during the night and on holidays, causing concern that people will not receive proper emergency treatment. According to the Health Ministry, however, 99% of the emergency rooms are still operating 24 hours a day, while around 6% are operating with a reduced number of beds. The total number of doctors working in emergency rooms is a little over 74% of the average. Monday's briefing was the government's first daily briefing held to provide the public with up-to-date details on emergency care. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
In other news, North Korea resumed sending hundreds of trash-filled balloons to the south this week. Bae Eun-ji has more on what might be motivating the regime to carry out this provocation.
From 9 a.m. to noon on Thursday, North Korea started sending more trash-carrying balloons, following the resumption of its balloon campaign the night before, after around a month. South Korea's military said the North launched around 480 balloons from Wednesday night to Thursday morning, and that around 100 of them, carrying paper and plastic bottles, were found in Seoul and northern Gyeonggi-do province. It advised the public to refrain from touching the fallen balloons and to report them to the police or military.
As for the rest of the balloons, they may have been blown back to North Korea, or there may be some that we have not been able to find just yet. But considering the direction of the wind, we believe there is a possibility that some of the balloons might have fallen in areas that we are unable to observe.
The North has launched thousands of balloons carrying trash in recent months, in protest against propaganda leaflets sent by North Korean activists and defectors in South Korea. In response, the South has been using frontline loudspeakers to blast broadcasts of propaganda messages and K-pop songs. An expert on North Korea says it's also important to look at the timing of the North resuming its balloon campaign.
It's a move to counter anti-North Korea leaflets, and I believe their strategic motive is to create anxiety ahead of Japanese Prime Minister Kishida's visit and the Chuseok holidays.
The South Korean government said voluntary actions from civic organizations cannot be an excuse for the North's provocative actions, calling it reckless behavior. 배은지, Arirang News.
Now, meanwhile, officials from South Korea and the U.S. have discussed responses to a possible major provocation by North Korea around the time of the U.S. presidential election in November. The fifth meeting of the Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consultation Group between South Korea and the U.S. took place in Washington on Wednesday local time. For the first time at the meeting, the two countries conducted a scenario-based discussion on North Korea's nuclear threats. The U.S. Department of Defense released a statement saying any nuclear attack by North Korea against the U.S. or its allies is unacceptable and will result in the end of that regime. And turning to international news, the bodies of 6 hostages held by Hamas were found last weekend, sparking mass protests in Israel. Days later, Hamas released videos of the captives via Telegram. Let's turn to our foreign affairs correspondent Peunji for more.
Hamas released a video of one of the 6 slain captives whose bodies were recovered by the Israeli military from Gaza over the weekend. In a 2-minute-long edited video released on the Telegram channel of Hamas military wing, 25-year-old Ori Danino asked the Israeli people to not neglect those being held by Hamas. This comes a day after the militant group on Monday night first released a video of one of the murdered hostages, 24-year-old Eden Yelosami, who had been working as a bartender at the Nova Music Festival on October 7th, on the day she was kidnapped by Hamas.
אני רוצה לפנות למשפחה היקרה שלי שאני כל כך אוהבת ואני מתגעגעת אליכם, אמא, אבא, שני, מאי, אני אוהבת אתכם כל כך ואני מתגעגעת אליכם.
The bodies of 6 slain captives were recovered from a tunnel in Gaza by Israeli military on Saturday local time. The Israeli government conducted a forensic examination and said the hostages appeared to have been shot at close range, sometime between Thursday and Friday morning. In response to the video showing Israeli hostages, the White House press secretary said Hamas will pay for their crimes, and that U.S. President Joe Biden will work around the clock with his team to get a ceasefire deal done.
Make no mistake about it, Hamas leaders are going to pay for these crimes. And he and his team, for sure, will keep working around the clock to get this hostage deal done. And this is a president that has been pretty clear about that.
The U.S. Department of Justice also charged several senior Hamas leaders over the terrorist attack on October 7th, making it the first step by the Justice Department to hold people accountable for the attack in Israel. The 5 defendants, including Yahya Sinwar, the terrorist organization's leader in Gaza, are facing 7 charges, such as terrorism charges, conspiracy to murder U.S. nationals, and conspiracy to use weapons of mass destruction resulting in death. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of Israeli protesters poured into the streets in Tel Aviv for a 3rd night on Sunday, in grief and anger. They demanded Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reach a ceasefire agreement with Hamas to bring the remaining hostages home and end the nearly 11 months of war. 배은지, Arirang News.
And over in Ukraine, Russian forces conduct deadly airstrikes this week, killing more than 57 people. The deadliest Russian airstrike so far in Ukraine hit a military educational facility, killing more than 50 people and injuring over 200. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, 2 ballistic missiles struck the facility and a nearby hospital located in the city of Poltava. On Wednesday, there was another air attack on Ukraine's western city of Lviv, not far from the border with Poland, killing 7 people and injuring more than 30, according to regional officials. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden strongly condemned the missile attacks, promising continuous support for Ukraine. On the economic front, one key factor behind South Korea's declining birth rate is the financial burden of raising a child. Now, this week, Seoul City launched a pilot program employing 100 caregivers from the Philippines to offer more affordable care in selected households. Our economics correspondent Moon Hae-ryun explores the benefits and challenges of this program.
Last month, 100 Filipino women landed at Incheon Airport as part of the government's efforts to address the demographic time bomb. Since their arrival, they've taken mandated caregiver training run by the government to prepare them for the work they'll be doing for the next 6 months. The competition to be selected to employ their services was fierce, with 731 South Korean households applying and only 157 selected. The majority of those chosen for the pilot program were working parents with more than one child, with the target groups being working, single, or expecting parents. Caregivers can be hired for 4 or 8 hours a day, and based on a 40-hour working week, their monthly wages total 2.38 million Korean won, or nearly $1,800. At 0.72 last year, the country's fertility rate remains one of the world's lowest and far below the level needed for a stable population. Experts point to demanding jobs, stagnant wages, and rising living costs as key factors. Dual-income households have surged as a result, surpassing 6 million last year, with over half of families with young children having both parents working full-time. But despite growing demand for childcare services, the government says there's a shortage and existing options are too costly. This pilot program aims to tackle this issue, but $1,800 per month is no small sum for the average parent in South Korea, and is being seen as one of the reasons why many households that applied and were selected for the pilot program were located in the capital's wealthier areas. Yet lowering costs could lead to other problems.
Reducing wages could make it more difficult to secure workers, as foreign domestic workers have many other options once they get into Korea.
Vague guidelines of work for Filipino caregivers which restrict them to childcare have also been raised as an issue. This may have contributed to 15 households cancelling on the first day, though no official reasons were given. However, experts note that as a pilot program, it offers a chance to improve and could serve as a model for addressing broader demographic issues.
It would be more realistic to view this as a policy experiment to test how foreign workers can be utilised in caregiving services for the elderly population in a super-aging society.
The government plans to bring in up to 1,000 caregivers by 2028 if this pilot takes off, but discussions are still underway. 문혜련, Arirang News.
And staying with economy, South Korea's National Statistics Agency released the latest inflation figures for August. Inflation has slowed to within the government's target range of 2%. Park Gun-woo reports.
Inflation in South Korea is showing signs of stabilizing, as last month it reached the government's target. According to Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the Consumer Price Index saw an on-year rise of 2% in August. That's the smallest jump since March 2021. Smaller increases in the prices for petroleum products due to lower international oil prices and farm produce were given as the main reasons. The Consumer Price Index has been under 3% for 5 straight months since April. It has also been continuously seeing on-year falls since then, except for a slight jump in July. While the government also said on Tuesday that it predicts inflation will stay at the low 2% range, one expert says that's not enough.
Before COVID-19, it has been lower than 2%. It is almost, less than 1%. So I think we have a little more to go in terms of price stability.
The price of petroleum products rose by 0.1% on year in August, a sharp drop compared to July, when it spiked by over 8%. Farm products soared by 3.6%, again a smaller rise than July, when it jumped by 9%. The price of pears skyrocketed by some 120%. However, according to an official from Statistics Korea, the price will fall with newly harvested pears available soon. At a Vice Ministerial Economic meeting held on Tuesday, First Vice Minister of Economy and Finance, Kim Bum-seok, said the government will do its best to manage prices of high-demand products ahead of the Chuseok holiday in order to keep prices low. He added it will be releasing 170,000 tons of high-demand products, including apples and pears, along with supporting discounts for agricultural and fisheries products. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
And South Korea's economy, which saw a strong performance in the first quarter, saw a downturn in the second quarter of this year. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Thursday, the country's gross domestic product from April till June shrunk by 0.2% compared to the previous year. It's the first time in 18 months for the on-quarter growth to be negative. Now, this is mostly attributed to the base effect caused by relatively high GDP growth of 1.3% in the first quarter. An increase in imports compared to exports was also behind the downturn. Meanwhile, the country's gross national income was up 0.9% on quarter as net factor income from the rest of the world decreased. On Wednesday, September 4th, the Taekwondo community here in South Korea marked Taekwondo Day, an annual celebration of the sport's Olympic debut. Our Choi Soo-young was at the ceremony and is here in the studio to share some stories about what she covered for our weekly focus this week. Welcome, Soo-young.
Thank you for having me here, Joo-jin.
Thank you for joining us. So let's first talk about the Taekwondo sport for our international viewers who might not be familiar with what it is.
Sure, Taekwondo is a Korean martial art and a combat sport between two players using kicking and punching techniques. The World Taekwondo Federation says Tae means strike with foot, Kwon means strike with hand, and Do means the way of training to develop a sense of morality. Currently, the world's largest Taekwondo training arena, named Taekwondo One, is in Mujugun County in Jeollabdo province. It has been run by the Taekwondo Promotion Foundation since 2014. And over those past 10 years, the Taekwondo One has played a central role in promoting the sport to the world. It has welcomed over 2.5 million visitors, with around 20,000 foreigners visiting each year for training in Taekwondo.
Wow, Taekwondo has indeed played a key role in raising awareness of the sport. Now, Soo-young, you actually visited the very Taekwondo One this Wednesday, which was Taekwondo Day, right?
Right, Yoo-jin, this Korean martial art was officially introduced as an Olympic sport on September 4th in 1994. Because of this, South Korea has commemorated the date as Taekwondo Day each year. This year, the ceremony celebrated the 30th anniversary of its inclusion in the Olympics. Gold medalists Park Tae-jun and Kim Yoo-jin from the Paris Olympics a few weeks ago also participated in the event. Let's take a listen what both said.
I've been here often, so the event felt more relaxed and comfortable for me. I'm also grateful that we were invited to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Taekwondo.
It was so nice to be here, because I'm familiar with this place.
And on this year's Taekwondo Day, a new type of Taekwondo was actually introduced for the first time, right?
Right, it's called the virtual Taekwondo, competing in a virtual space with some equipment. Players attach sensors equipped with motion tracking technology to their arms and legs with VR equipment and compete as virtual characters in a digital space. On Wednesday and Thursday, the first ever 2024 International Open Virtual Taekwondo Championships created by the Taekwondo Promotion Foundation were held. After about 2 to 3 years of development, this format has been completed and is said to be gaining a lot of attention from Taekwondo athletes around the world. In the championships, 35 athletes from 5 countries competed, including South Korea, Singapore, and Rwanda.
Then how is virtual Taekwondo different from the traditional Taekwondo we know of?
Yes, unlike traditional Taekwondo, age, sex, and weight classes don't matter in this format. I actually saw it myself, and it was more exciting than I expected. It was fun, and it reminded me of the video game Street Fighter that I used to play when I was young. Lee Da-bin, this year's bronze medalist in the Paris Games, also stated that she enjoyed the unique appeal of virtual Taekwondo through a match at the event. Let's hear about the advantages she noticed while actually participating in the match.
It felt like a very short time and was less exhausting. I could use various kicks without any hesitation. I think one of the biggest advantages is that players can compete without physically fighting. I believe viewers will find it very entertaining.
The foundation has stated that it plans to further improve and develop the sport. As the International Olympic Committee decided to create an official esports Olympics, the first edition will be held in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 2025. South Korea plans to register virtual Taekwondo as an official sport in the first ever esports Olympics, preparing for the next 30 years of the Korean martial art.
Sounds interesting. All right, Soo-young, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And staying with sports, the Paris 2024 Paralympic Games will come to a close on Sunday night local time. And here are some of the highlights for Team Korea. South Korea's first gold medal came in shooting, with pistol shooter Cho Jung-do winning in the men's 10-meter air pistol event. And also in shooting, Park Jin-ho became South Korea's first double gold medalist of the Games, securing victories in both the men's 50-meter rifle 3 positions and the 10-meter air rifle standing events. And Team Korea once again proved its strength in Botsya, with Jung Ho-won clinching gold in the men's individual event. Now with this, South Korea has won at least 1 gold medal in Botsya at 10 consecutive Paralympic Games. Over in para-badminton, Chung Jae-gun and Yoo Soo-young made their successful Paralympic debut, winning silver in the men's doubles event, finishing just behind the defending champions from China. Choi Jung-man also completed his first Paralympic journey with a silver medal in the men's singles event. And para-table tennis player Kim Ki-tae helped Team Korea achieve its initial goal of winning at least 5 golds with victory in the men's singles discipline. And that's all for this week's edition of Weekly News Highlights. Thank you for watching, and on behalf of all of us here at Arirang News, we hope you have a great rest of the weekend.